such as the arrival of solar ions and FTEs. The magnetosphere bidirectional jets of plasma easily remind one of the bidirectional DNA molecule in the quantum world. Magnetic reconnection or DNA recombination. As an important example, let's look closer at the magnetic reconnection in the Earth's magnetosphere compared to DNA recombination. Because the magnetic fields of the sun and Earth bump into each other, field lines stretch, snap, and reconnect, causing sun particles to slide like beads into the Earth's magnetic field lines. In time, these sun particles arrive at the poles and generate the aurorae. The cellular counterpart to this snapping and reconnection of the sun lines with the Earth's magnetic fields is break-induced DNA recombination. In figure 4.1, showing reconnection of magnetic field lines, an X-type neutral line possesses flanking magnetic fields in opposite directions, one north and one south, similar to the opposite directions of the strands of DNA molecule. This model of steady or forced magnetic reconnection relative to northward and southward IMFs at the 4 points in the magnetosphere is similar to break-induced DNA recombination. At the Earth's cusp, impulsive or bursty reconnection causes breaks and is signaled by the staircase cusp that results in a flux transfer event. Because of these similarities between magnetic reconnection and DNA recombination, a further exploration of the Egyptian idea of crossing over is necessary. Right. Crossing over as recombinational repair. Coffin text 293. Come, cross over. Idea strand 21. Dead king crosses over to pure places of Ra, ferries across to other side. Idea strand 22. Dead king finds broken cords and knots them on soul waters. Dead king finds broken cords and knots them so water are joined. Lands united, rivers united. Magnetic reconnection and DNA recombination or recombinational repair can both be described as crossing over. The deceased claims that he has found and knotted the several ropes. And this comes out of the coffin text 132, 136, 219, 408, and 1099. Or the broken cord in coffin text 144. He joins the riverbanks at coffin text 168 through 172, so that the Milky Way can be crossed at coffin text 622. These meta symbols suggest the process of cutting and splicing DNA, which begins with an endonucleus performing single strand nicks into each DNA. Strand exchanges or invasion is the crossing over activity. RECA protein helps the strand base pair so the nicks can be sealed by DNA ligase. If a branch migration at the crossover point or X line occurs, or if each strand becomes part of the opposite molecule, we can conclude that the Egyptian idea of crossing over suggests not only magnetic reconnection, but also DNA recombination or repair. DNA recombination as the splitting of iron. Idea strand 97. Dead king splits iron of mouth. descends on iron bands, sits on iron throne, is knit together with iron, receiving offerings on great iron plane, has stellar iron and cutaways iron. On the cellular level, iron is embedded in the center of the DNA double helix at certain loci. An important nutrient for gram-negative bacteria like E. coli, iron plays a fundamental metabolic role by catalyzing hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen enzymatic reactions. The bacterium has receptor proteins in its outermost membrane that function to uptake iron by binding iron-containing molecules. Iron complexes are then localized on the cell surface, where they are available for transport into the cell. To complicate the uptake process, E. coli has a double cell barrier of two lipid layers, the outer membrane and the cytoplasmic membrane. So the bacteria cell synthesizes molecules called cytophores that seize ferric iron. Then these iron-containing cytophores are transported into cytoplasm into the cytoplasm of the bacterial cell. Modern researchers have many questions about this process, which might be answered by a comparative review of the dynamics of magnetic reconnection. Iron nuclei at the cuffs and flux transfer events in the Earth's magnetosphere for iron-containing cytophores in the cell act similarly to flux ropes in the magnetosphere. As DNA recombination includes cutting and splicing of strands, the deceased uses language imagery such as "I am he who splits iron" to explain this process. Faulkner notes the variation of the translations "who splits what is joined," stating that this is an allusion to the splitting of the iron of the sky at the deceased's ascension. The deceased splits mountains, and this is brought out in Coffin Text 275, like Anubis, who breaks the sky's iron and opens up the west at Coffin Text 816. Egyptian imagery also describes opening the doors to Osiris in the firmament at Coffin Text 866, or dividing the firmament at Coffin Text 98. The deceased also splits open the darkness. This is all found at Coffin Text 1106, 1116, and splits open the doors of the tomb as he greets Ra in his son at Coffin Text 105. This process includes not only opening the earth, but also the sky and the horizon, all of which actually happens at a magnetic point, all of which actually happens at points of magnetic reconnection in the Earth's magnetosphere. So, on the macro scale of Earth, iron is cut by magnetic reconnection. On a quantum scale of Earth, iron is cut by DNA recombination. Decoded.